David Rowan tipped back in his chair, the wheels squeaking on the hardwood floor of his cramped apartment. Sunlight filtered through thin curtains, throwing streaks of pale orange across his desk. His home office, really just a corner of his living room, looked more like a storage closet for half-finished sketches and random IT equipment than a place for daily work. Yet it was here, in this makeshift workspace, that he found both purpose and a hidden gateway to worlds beyond imagination. He closed his eyes. His breath slowed as he let his mind wander, slipping toward another life. Sometimes he almost felt the intangible currents of energy that game promised. Over the last few months, the mere act of thinking about it warmed him from the inside out. He'd discovered another life by stumbling across an obscure forum filled with cryptic posts about a mysterious author named J. Bart. A handful of tight-knit enthusiasts called themselves keepers of Bart's rare text, top 10 games you can play in your head by yourself, and among those games was another life, the one that had rescued David from the throes of a long, subtle depression. His eyes snapped open. Work beckoned, and he began typing out lines of code for the remote IT firm that paid his bills. He hammered away at the keyboard with quick, practiced efficiency. His shift technically started at dawn, but he'd been at it for an hour already, almost on autopilot, wrapping up bug fixes before the official morning stand-up call. After finishing his last line of code, he flicked off his work interface with a sigh. His gaze landed on a half-finished pencil sketch taped to the wall, a swirling dragon made of smoke and glass. David nodded to himself in satisfaction. Creating that piece had been part of his last run through another life, one of the many lives he inhabited in his mind. He was a lean man in his early 30s, brown eyes kind and thoughtful, short hair carefully combed. He liked order, especially after years of feeling so scattered. Though gently spoken, he carried a quiet resolve in the way he held his shoulders back. He rose, grabbed a light jacket, and swept aside the half-eaten bagel on his coffee table. Time for his side gig, deliveries. It wasn't glamorous work, but it offered him a sense of clarity. He could listen to music or just let his thoughts drift as he navigated the city. Out on the sidewalks, towering steel skyscrapers and neon signs draped in labyrinthine graffiti soared above him. The city was an urban sprawl of raucous energy and elusive corners where one might hide away. If one was of a mind too, it was easy to slip into daydreams about magical realms right here, though as David had learned, real magic could be found in the unlikeliest places. He waved to Emery Tate, who stood in front of a coffee shop waiting for a train. Emery was shorter than David by nearly a foot, with a constant smear of ink on his fingertips. He wore a button-up shirt that already had coffee stains from one too many spills. Emery was a creative copywriter by trade, and the two had grown close after discovering their mutual fascination with another life. Emery cracked a grin. "Burning both ends again, Dave?" David shrugged. "I like working before dawn. Leaves time for everything else." "Just don't get lost in your daydreams," Emery teased gently. "You're playing that game a lot more than usual." The concern in his voice was unmistakable. "Remember, just because you can conjure worlds in your head doesn't mean the real one ceases to exist." David offered an easy smile. I know. Don't forget the daily joys of reality, as you always say. I've got it under control." "Do you?" Emery asked, voice soft yet pointed. "You've said that before." But David merely squeezed Emery's shoulder in reassurance and continued on his way, deliveries strapped to his messenger bag. He wouldn't deny that another life had become nearly obsessive for him, but how could he let go of something that had awakened his spirit, something that finally let him experience real magic? He finished his runs by midday, returning to his apartment complex. As he climbed the stairs, he found a woman in bold street attire painting a mural on the hallway wall. Her rose-gold hair glowed under fluorescent lights, and the streaks of paint on her cheeks and arms made her look like she was half-living canvas herself. "Sorry, am I in the way?" she asked without looking away from her spray can. "Not at all," David replied, momentarily entranced by the swirling color. The mural depicted a phoenix bursting out of chains, vibrant and powerful. "It's stunning." She turned, eyes bright. "Thanks. Property management commissioned me to liven up these dreary halls." She noticed his own paint-splattered messenger bag. "You do art, too?" "Some," David said quietly, though his heart gave a jolt of excitement. "I'm David." "Lily Tanaka," the woman replied. She took in his skinny frame, the careful way he held himself. "You a full-time artist, or?" He managed a small laugh. "IT by day, deliveries by midday, aspiring artist by night." A grin spread across Lily's lips. "I like that. Triple threat. Well, watch your step, paint's still fresh." David nodded, and as he walked away, he felt the slightest hint of magic in that moment, a spark passing between them like static electricity. Lily Tanaka. He repeated the name in his mind. She intrigued him, and for a moment, his imagination soared, as though a realm of swirling color beckoned. But he reminded himself to stay grounded. Emery's words echoed in his head. Don't forget the daily joys of reality. At dusk, David sat in his threadbare armchair, opened a worn copy of Top 10 Games You Can Play in Your Head by Yourself, and flipped to Another Life. The book was so old it smelled of mold and dusty parchment. The faint scrawl of J. Bart's disclaimers in the margins warned of irreversible illusions and the seductive nature of living too many lives. David swallowed, heart beating in anticipation. He closed the book, inhaled deeply, and let his consciousness drift. There were 4 rules, and he recited them silently. 1. Choose another life. 2. Imagine yourself living it fully, committing to the experience. 3. Continue until you reach a logical conclusion or learn a life lesson. 4. Return to reality, placing an item from that life into your sanctuary of treasures. He remembered the final piece of the ritual, the sanctuary, his personal mental vault, where all the items from these imaginary lifetimes were stored. But his shadow self prowled that vault, eager to tamper, to sabotage. The ephemeral figure that mirrored David's deepest insecurities and self-doubts sometimes grabbed these treasures and scattered them like a mischievous ghost. Part of him found it unnerving, but he couldn't deny the allure of the game. Even the cautionary testimonial by a man named Danny G., describing how 17 days in a desert had passed in only 2 days of real time, only thrilled David more. The potential was infinite. His eyes fluttered shut, and he called forth his new life, a traveling swordsman in a feudal-inspired realm, crossing ancient bridges that led to cloud-wreathed temples. Suddenly, the apartment around him dimmed, replaced by an expansive valley with tall grasses rustling in the wind. He gripped a blade at his hip, feeling every stitch of the cloth scabbard. If he concentrated, he'd smell the petrichor in the moist air. This was another life indeed. When David opened his eyes again, it was nearly midnight, though it felt as if he'd lived months battling demon lords in that feudal dreamscape. Exhilaration and exhaustion dueled within him. He took a moment to center himself, realigning with reality just as the rules demanded. Before fully letting go, he secured his final spoils in his mental sanctuary, a small jade token he'd won from slaying the region's tyrant. He visualized stepping through a swirling portal back to the quiet calm of the vault. There, countless relics, crystal rings, ancient scrolls, keys to lost cities, rested on towering shelves. He placed the jade token among them. His shadow self slunk in a corner, peering out, its expression unreadable. David opened his physical eyes and practically leapt to his feet. His pulse still hammered from the fight sequences that had felt so real. He marched to the bathroom, splashed cold water on his face, and stared at himself. Was this healthy? He was rejuvenated, no doubt. But Emery's warnings and that caution in J. Bart's margins haunted him, telling him the game could be a gateway to madness. He would have dwelled on it longer, but a piercing beep from his phone cut through the night. He glanced at the screen and saw a name that made his blood run cold: Gideon West. David had only conversed with Gideon through the community's private channels, where Gideon's contributions were few and far between. Rumor had it Gideon personally met J. Bart decades ago. If Gideon was reaching out now, something important must be happening. He answered. G. Gideon? David, came a hoarse but earnest voice. We need to talk in person. I'm in town. How'd you get my? From Emery, Gideon said, not waiting for David to finish. Look, I'm only here for a couple of days. Meet me at Baird Street Warehouse in an hour, no later. Then the line went dead. Heart pounding, David threw on a heavier coat and slipped outside. A flickering street lamp buzzed overhead as he flagged down a taxi. The city glowed with neon signs and the rumor of midnight secrets. The hum of engines and the hush of distant sirens set an almost surreal tone. When David arrived, he found the warehouse on Baird Street battered by time, half of its windows boarded up. Inside, fluorescent lights sputtered across dusty crates. In the corner stood a wiry man with a close-cropped beard and swirling tattoos across his weathered hands. Gideon West. His voice was calmer in person than over the phone, but it thrummed with a quiet authority. David Rowan, Gideon greeted, stepping forward. You've been quite active in the game. David nodded. It saved me in some ways. Gideon tilted his head, as if reading David's soul. Another life isn't a toy. You know that. The deeper you go, the more your shadow grows. David bristled slightly. I've handled it so far. That's how it starts, Gideon said. I told Emery I'd try to warn you, but there's more. We've lost track of Serena Crow. She's discovered a method, some twisted exploit of the game, to siphon imagination from others. It grants her unnatural abilities in this world. We're not sure how far she's taken it, but we know she's hunting any copies of J. Bart's volumes to augment her power. She's unscrupulous, to say the least. David felt a knot tighten in his stomach. He knew Serena by reputation. She'd once been allied with the community, helping them locate missing books, but that had ended badly when she started selling them on the black market. Why involve me? Gideon's voice dropped to a grave whisper. Because you have an uncorrupted connection to the game, your mind is in the sweet spot, balanced enough between imagination and discipline. Serena's set her sights on you, David. She believes your ability to traverse another life without losing yourself is a rare gift she can exploit. She wants to bend reality. In other words, we need to stop her. David's hands clenched into fists. He'd never asked to become some chosen hero. What am I supposed to do? Gideon rummaged in a crate and pulled out a battered text with J. Bart's name on the cover. You must go deeper. It'll be dangerous, especially with your shadow. But you must strengthen the bond to your sanctuary. There's an advanced technique hidden in these pages, Bart's instructions on merging multiple lives at once to create a new level of power. But be warned, it's more addictive than anything you've tried. You could get trapped for years in a single night if you're not careful. David swallowed. I understand. Gideon placed a hand on David's shoulder. If you choose to do this, Emery, Milo, and yes, even Sasha, though she's become somewhat of a rival to you, may be your allies. Lily Tanaka, too, if you trust her. But keep Serena off balance. She's already hacked into the game in ways that blur the line between what's real and what's imaginary. From there, the conversation ended almost as abruptly as it had begun. Gideon melted into the shadows. David left the warehouse reeling, the weight of the city pressing down on him like never before. David found Milo Green anxiously waiting outside his building the next morning. Milo was a bespectacled college student with wild, unkempt hair, clutching a tattered copy of Top 10 Games You Can Play in Your Head by Yourself. He looked at David with wide-eyed relief. David. Emery told me you spoke to Gideon, Milo said breathlessly. Is it true about Serena? That she's basically turned into some kind of arcane warlord in the real world? We don't know all the details yet, David said. But yes. She's dangerous. Milo adjusted his glasses, clearly spooked. I'll help in any way I can.
I don't have your experience, but I love another life.
Let me learn from you. David gave him a firm nod. I could use your help, Milo. But we have to be careful. He glanced up at the swirling mural Lily had been working on, not quite finished. The chains were nearly painted over entirely by the rising phoenix. A tingle of warmth coursed through his chest. Lily represented possibility in the real world, her boldness with colors matched the intensity David felt in his conjured worlds. At that moment, Lily appeared from around the corner, wiping pink paint off her hands with a rag. She flashed David a smile. Looks like you've got company. David introduced Milo, who stared at Lily with an awe that bordered on reverence. Lily's gaze flickered between the two men. You both look like you've seen ghosts. David hesitated, then quietly explained a sanitized version of the situation, omitting certain extremes about another life, but mentioning the danger posed by Serena. Lily listened, eyes sharp and curious. So, you're telling me this game you play might allow someone to bend reality? Sounds like a wild fantasy, but I've seen some pretty strange things around here. Count me in if I can help. I don't like bullies. It was at that moment David felt a surge of gratitude. Maybe he didn't have to face the darkness alone. They decided to rendezvous that evening at Emery's small townhouse. Emery cleared off a table covered in drafts of marketing slogans and offered them tea. The last to arrive was Sasha Rivera, David's one-time friend, turned rival. She wore a leather jacket and had her violet-dyed hair swept back in a practical ponytail. She smirked at David, her eyes dancing with familiar competition. I heard Gideon gave you the big quest, she drawled. Don't get cocky, David. We both know I'm closer to solving J. Bart's final puzzle than you are. David suppressed a sigh. It's not a competition right now, Sasha. This is about something much bigger. Everything is a competition, Sasha fired back, though her bravado softened a bit at the mention of Serena. I won't let that witch run amok. If we're teaming up, though, she added, flipping her ponytail, I'm calling the shots if it comes to puzzle solving. Emery cleared his throat, picking up on the tension. Focus. Gideon said we need to anchor ourselves in reality. That means if we dive deep into another life, we do it in pairs or groups, so we can watch each other and keep track of real time. Milo nodded vigorously. Time can pass differently in there, right? Like Danny G said, it can feel like days, even weeks. A knock on the door brought them face to face with Gideon again. He slipped inside, closed the door softly, and wasted no time. Serena's on the move. She's found a copy of J. Bart's personal notes. She can manipulate the boundary between the game and real life. We must stop her from finalizing that power. She could rewrite the rules of the city itself if left unchecked. David's heart hammered. How do we confront her? By mastering the advanced technique in Bart's text, Gideon answered, eyes grim. It's called Convergent Lives. You merge multiple lives in your sanctuary to gain extraordinary abilities here. But it's a volatile practice. You'll need to slip into a shared realm while physically remaining in the same room. The rest of us will stand guard, ensuring no one is lost or that Serena doesn't ambush us. Sasha stepped forward, eyes alight with challenge. Count me in. I've tried partial merges before, but never a full-on convergence. This could get interesting. Emery slowly raised his hand as if in protest, but Gideon's expression allowed no second guessing. So they prepared. The group gathered around a circle Emery hastily cleared on the living room floor. Gideon instructed them on focusing their imaginations in tandem. Lily watched from the edge, arms folded, heart pounding. She couldn't see what they saw, not yet, but she believed in them, believed in David. Milo sat cross-legged, determined to keep everyone stable. And thus began the greatest act of communal dreaming David had ever known. He closed his eyes, imagining his sanctuary. Towering shelves upon shelves of relics gleaned from many adventures, orbs, blades, potions, tapestries, mementos of entire lifetimes folded into ephemeral shapes. He felt Sasha's presence as a swirling, violet-hued breeze. He felt Emery's quieter aura like a solid anchor, and Milo's youthful exuberance crackled like sparks of electricity. Convergent lives, begin. David half whispered, half intoned, feeling his mind stretch to accommodate the new rules. His shadow self lurked at the outskirts of his vision, cackling softly. Sasha's shadow appeared as well, lips curled in a sardonic grin. Emery's shadow stood quietly, seemingly supportive rather than mischievous. Milo's wavered uncertainly, reflecting his nerves. Then the swirling energies converged, reality bending around them. In the space of a breath, they were transported to a colossal amphitheater made of shimmering obsidian. High above, the night sky crackled with purple lightning. This was a shared realm formed by their combined imaginations. David wore the same feudal swordsman garb from his last life. Sasha, clad in futuristic armor from one of her own lives, scanned the environment. Emery was robed in monk-like vestments, while Milo's attire was mismatched, bits and pieces from different eras, reflecting his scattered experiences. The amphitheater reverberated with their breathing. David tested a hand, conjuring one of his special moves from a prior adventure. Shadow Edge, he roared, and a blade of dark light erupted from his palm. Its smoky glow rippled across the obsidian floor. Sasha's lips parted in a triumphant grin. Nice. Let's see if I can do better. Tectonic pulse. She slammed her fists together, sending a fault line crack racing across the ground, jagged spikes rising in its wake. Emery, watchful as ever, balanced a wooden staff in one hand. Tranquil focus, he murmured, and a soft aura coalesced around him, the visual representation of his introspection. He was not a big fighter, but his powers in these dream realms always centered on control and calm. Milo bounced on the balls of his feet. I've never done a convergence before, but, here goes. Arc spiral. With that cry, he formed swirling orbs of multicolored energy above his head, launching them forward in a chaotic barrage. Though impressive in scale, they scattered unpredictably, forcing everyone to dodge. The air crackled. Something about this place felt half-formed, as if waiting for a final spark. Gideon's voice echoed faintly in the distance, though he was physically outside the shared realm. Your powers are heightened here. Stay together and stay alert. David scanned the obsidian stands. We should look for the door or gate that leads us deeper, to whatever advanced technique we need. We have to do this quickly. Serena might already be forging her new powers in a parallel realm. They pressed forward, the amphitheater giving way to a labyrinth of corridors. Each corridor split into fractal patterns that twisted in upon themselves. The group soon discovered they could shape the corridors at will. David summoned swirling dragon motifs from his earliest sketches to guide them. Sasha manipulated the ground beneath her to expedite their path. Emery prevented them from losing themselves with his calm presence, and Milo explored each twisting hallway with excited caution. Suddenly, the corridor trembled, and cracks formed in the walls. A swirling black rift tore open, and from it emerged Serena Crow's shadowy form. Her tall, sharp-featured silhouette was wreathed in silver flames, a manifestation of her real-world hacking of the game. In her intangible hand, she clutched a tattered page from J. Bart's notes, the words glowing with stolen power. "So, you meddling children want to chase me?" she hissed, her voice echoing with uncanny resonance. "I see you've discovered the convergence. Perfect. Let me test the fruits of my own labor." Her presence was suffocating, a swirling storm of malicious intent. Before they could react, her form shattered into dozens of shadowy tendrils that lashed out, each one crackling with ghostly electricity. The corridor buckled under the weight of her manifestation. Sasha launched herself forward. "I've been waiting for this." Tectonic pulse, earthquake bloom. She thrust her hands to the floor, summoning a violent quake that ruptured the corridor's foundation. Spires of black stone erupted beneath Serena's tendrils. They collided in an explosion of silver sparks. Meanwhile, Emery closed his eyes. Tranquil focus, stillness shield. A dome of translucent energy enclosed David, Milo, and Emery, deflecting the stray tendrils that tried to spear them. Each impact sent ripples of tension across Emery's brow. David felt adrenaline flood his veins. Shadow edge. He unleashed a slash of dark light that cleaved through multiple tendrils. At his side, Milo conjured swirling orbs. Arc spiral, nebula surge. The orbs multiplied, launching at the tendrils with rapid-fire intensity, bursts of color illuminating the corridor like fireworks. Serena's mocking laughter reverberated. Her silver-streaked hair flickered in and out of existence like flame. "Pathetic. You think you can match me? I've already integrated half of J. Bart's final notes into my mind." She raised her hands. Horizon break. Reality itself cracked around them. The corridor walls wavered, revealing glimpses of the real world, a warehouse, a city street, flickering in and out as time and space distorted. The group felt their stability slipping. "Focus," David yelled over the howling winds. "Don't let her break your connection." He pressed his palms together, struggling to recall an advanced skill from his feudal swordsman life, one he'd rarely used. Unbound seal, Gate of the Swords. A swirling portal opened behind him, from which half a dozen spectral swords emerged, each humming with stored power. They flew at Serena's shadow tendrils, colliding in bursts of ghostly steel. Sasha smirked, adding her own flair. Tectonic pulse, Titans fall. She stomped the ground, summoning a monolithic statue of living rock that pummeled the tendrils from the side. For a moment, Serena staggered under the combined assault. Her silver flame sputtered. Then she hissed and vanished into a swirl of black rifts, reappearing a short distance away, fury radiating from her intangible figure. Emery's voice cut through the chaos. "Watch out, she's shifting the environment again." The corridor gave way, and they found themselves outside, standing at the center of a vast desert under twin suns. The transition was disorienting, a testament to Serena's mastery of the game's illusions. Waves of heat shimmered across the sand. In the far distance, a jagged mountain range loomed, shadowed and foreboding. David shielded his eyes. "She can't be allowed to keep warping the realm like this. We'll get lost in these illusions." Serena's laugh echoed like thunder. "Then get lost you shall." With that, she conjured illusions of desert bandits, wraith-like figures with glowing eyes that sprinted across the dunes toward David and his companions. Milo paled but steadied himself. "I can handle some illusions." He clapped his hands together, voice rising. Arc spiral, celestial volley. Spheres of light burst forth, each streaming ribbons of color as they collided with the bandits. The illusions dissipated, shrieking as they vanished into the scorching air. Sasha dashed forward, forging a path toward Serena, who hovered near a swirling dust devil. "You're not running away again," she roared, tectonic pulse, obsidian spear. The ground rumbled, and a black spike erupted beneath Serena's feet, forcing her to dodge. David focused his will on the environment, recalling Gideon's advice: they could shape this world too. He imagined a ring of shimmering water appearing around Serena, hoping to trap her. "Aqua barricade," he bellowed, the watery energy swirling into a circling vortex. It worked, for a moment. Serena's silver flames hissed against the water, steam billowing around her. In that split second, Emery darted in with measured grace. His staff glowed with calm power. Tranquil focus, binding requiem. Threads of pale light lashed out, attempting to seal Serena's movements. But Serena snarled. "You can't contain me." She expanded her arms, and a shockwave of silver flame ignited the air, blasting Emery off his feet. He flew across the dune, landing hard. David rushed to Emery's side as Milo frantically launched orb after orb, stalling the illusions of desert beasts Serena conjured. Sasha harried Serena from behind with repeated quakes. Each clash shook the dunes, sending cascades of sand rolling down imaginary ridges. Emery coughed, wincing. We need to ground her in one place. Don't let her shift the scenery again. David's heart pounded. He thought of all the times he'd used another life to escape reality. Now, ironically, he was using it to fight for reality itself. The paradox fueled him. He clenched his fists, recalling one of his earliest forms from a simpler dream, an elemental dancer who manipulated wind. Perhaps he could combine that ability with his swordsman prowess. Closing his eyes, David invoked the memory. Convergent lives, twisting zephyr. In a swirl of dust, he pivoted, swirling wind around him. The wind took shape, forming a translucent tornado around his arms. Shadow edge plus twisting zephyr, tempest slash, he shouted, unleashing a massive, spiral-shaped sword beam that tore across the desert, ripping through illusions. It rocketed toward Serena, who tried to flee but got caught in the outer edges of the spiraling attack. Silver flames and black sand soared in a dizzying collision. Serena screamed, partially disintegrating before their eyes, but her voice echoed from the swirling dust. Devil, this isn't over. I have the real text. I have time on my side. Then she flickered out of existence, leaving only swirling sand and a sense of emptiness. The silence felt deafening. Milo collapsed to one knee, sweat pouring down his face. She escaped. Sasha spat a mouthful of sand. We bruised her at least. But she's got the advantage. We're stuck in the middle of this desert unless we figure out how to shift back. Emery cradled his bruised ribs. We can revert to the amphitheater if we concentrate together. Let's do it while we still can. They joined forces, weaving their energies, returning to that obsidian amphitheater. Once there, they peeled back from the shared realm and opened their real eyes. The living room around them came into sharp relief, the circles of chalk, Gideon's watchful form, Lily standing off to the side with a look of stunned fascination. Barely any time had passed outside, but the mental effort left them all drenched in sweat. Lily rushed over to David. You're all right? He nodded shakily. Yeah. But Serena's stronger than we expected. Gideon stepped forward. She's far advanced. Your best shot is to harness your real-world creativity. Bart's advanced technique can only go so far in these illusions. If you truly want to match Serena, you must learn to bring the best of the dream world into the real one, responsibly. David met Gideon's gaze. How? Gideon pointed to David's heart. By remembering why you create in the first place. By bridging the distance between escapism and artistry. You're an artist, David, don't let that be a mere side gig. When your creative power merges with your disciplined imagination, it'll surpass anything Serena can conjure. Sasha scoffed softly. That's a nice fortune cookie saying, old man. But how do we actually do it? Gideon merely smiled. Sometimes the best teacher is adversity. That adversity arrived sooner than expected. Over the next few days, rumors circulated through the hush-hush corners of the Another Life community. Serena was planning a final demonstration of her power, an event rumored to literally warp a section of the city. She aimed to prove that the illusions of another life could become a permanent fixture in the real world. David had barely slept. Between anxious patrols through the city's lesser-known neighborhoods and frantic attempts to glean new techniques from J. Bart's text, he felt the weight of this conflict. By the time the night of Serena's rumored demonstration arrived, tension coiled tight in his muscles. It happened in an abandoned amusement park at the outskirts of the city, once called Mystic Falls Funland. Broken rides jutted like skeletons under the moonlight, and flickering neon signs sputtered with half-dead electricity. David, Sasha, Emery, Milo, Gideon, and Lily made their way inside, the stale scent of rust and decay filling the air. Giant clown faces loomed overhead on tattered billboards. There, at the center, was Serena Crow. Gone were her purely intangible illusions. She stood in the flesh, silver-streaked hair swirling in an invisible wind. Symbols faintly glowed along her skin, arcane code she must have stolen from J. Bart's notes. She lifted a hand, and the night sky around them warped. Moonlight refracted, twisting into spirals of color. The air crackled with static, and suddenly, illusions poured into reality, spectral carnival rides lit up, shimmering creatures roamed the broken attractions, and monstrous silhouettes took shape in the shadows. A roaring roller coaster track overhead lit with swirling neon as if brought back to life by a phantom power source. Emery gasped. She's bringing the illusions here. Sasha took a fighting stance, fists trembling with excitement. Finally, a chance to see just how strong I've become. Tectonic pulse, piercing quake. She slammed her foot on the concrete, and a shockwave tore across the carnival grounds, toppling a row of rusted game booths. But illusions soared around it like intangible ghosts, unaffected. Serena raised an eyebrow. Is that all you've got, Sasha? I've woven my illusions with real matter. Your simple quake can't dispel them now. She smirked, stepping forward. Watch how true power works. Horizon break, real-world overlap. She swung her arms wide, and the illusions multiplied, shifting between horrifying clowns, vengeful wraiths, and giant mechanical beasts. The boundaries of real and imaginary blurred, sending David's senses spinning. Gideon barked out, "Stay focused. This is a new level of conflation, she's merging entire illusions with reality. We must attack her directly." Milo readied an orb of light. Arc spiral, meteor nova. The orb rocketed toward Serena, burning bright as a small sun. She lifted a single hand, silver flames dancing around her palm. Reflective cipher, she muttered, and the orb ricocheted harmlessly into a Ferris wheel, which screeched under the impact but remained intact. David's heart pounded. He needed to draw on his creativity in the real world. He eyed a broken carousel not far from where Serena stood. Its paint was chipped, the horses half missing their heads, but he could see a potential in it, a canvas of sorts. He sprinted toward it, ignoring the illusions that lurched and hissed around him. Lily, eyes wide, followed close behind. "David, what are you doing?" "Something new," he said, voice taut. He knelt before the carousel's battered platform. With trembling hands, he imagined a swirl of color, shapes, and runic designs. In another life, he could conjure illusions with ease. But Gideon said to bring artistry into the real world. That meant physically manifesting it. He whipped out a small set of paint markers from his pocket. He carried them out of habit for quick sketching. With shaky breath, he began to draw swirling lines, glyphs reminiscent of what he'd used in his feudal swordsman life. Lily stared, then hurried to help. She traced bolder lines with her own markers, forming them into phoenix-like wings. The design glowed in David's mind, nearly alive. Serena, meanwhile, noticed them. Pitiful attempt. She conjured a monstrous clown head from the swirling illusions, sending it lunging toward David. Sasha and Milo intercepted the creature with combined blasts, tectonic pulse, earth-split barrage. From Sasha, an arc spiral, starlight storm. From Milo. The monster disintegrated in a cacophony of swirling confetti. David's marker lines blazed with color. The carousel shuddered. He pictured the glyphs fueling a protective barrier, an imaginative concept bridging into reality. He and Lily both gasped as the paint actually glowed. Lily's eyes widened with awe. "David, this is real magic," she whispered. He pressed a palm against the platform. "Yes, but it's ours. Let's do this." Serena snarled, hurling a spear of silver flame at them. But a radiant shield erupted from the carousel's glyphs, deflecting her attack. The battered carousel flickered with life, grotesquely beautiful in its broken form. David rose, eyes filled with determination. "We're not just illusions, Serena. We're creators, of art, of possibilities. That's the real magic J. Bart was pointing to." "Don't lecture me," Serena spat, eyes blazing. "I'll rewrite the city in my image. No one will ever overshadow my brilliance." She unleashed a torrent of illusions, dragons, mechs, swirling geometric shapes, everything hammered at the carousel's shield. David turned to Lily. "We need to push back with an offensive. You know color better than anyone. Use it." She nodded, heart pounding. She dashed along the carousel's edge, painting vibrant arcs that formed a swirling, prismatic pattern. David channeled his mind's conjuration to harmonize with her physical strokes. The glyphs pulsed, building up energy. Lily locked eyes with David. "Do your big move. I'll keep feeding it color." He took a steadying breath. "Right." Closing his eyes, he let memories of another life surge through him, his swordsman's discipline, the elemental dancer's fluid grace, the alchemist's cunning. He merged them in his mind. When he opened his eyes, a swirl of multicolored energy spiraled around him. He leapt onto the carousel platform, brandishing an imaginary sword of prismatic light. The time had come for a final, massive strike. "Convergent lives, Aurora storm," David bellowed. At that moment, the glyphs Lily had drawn exploded in a storm of color. Prismatic beams lanced across the air, shooting towards Serena's illusions. They collided in a dazzling flash that lit up the amusement park brighter than any carnival lights ever had. The illusions cracked, fraying under the assault of raw creativity woven with discipline. Serena shrieked, summoning more illusions, but they dissolved one by one under the relentless Aurora storm. She shielded her face, silver flames flickering. No, no, no. Her body trembled as the illusions she'd woven into reality collapsed around her like shattered glass. Across the park, Emery, Sasha, and Milo seized the opportunity. Emery's staff glowed with calm, binding light. Sasha slammed her fists into the ground, generating a final quake that rattled the entire park, while Milo shot spheres of color overhead. Their combined energies pinned Serena in place. David dismounted the carousel and strode toward her, the prismatic blade still gleaming in his hand. He saw terror in her eyes. For a moment, he almost pitied her. She was addicted to power, just like he was once addicted to the escapism of another life. But she'd used that power to harm others. Her silver flame sputtered. She fell to her knees as illusions drained out of her, returning the amusement park to its original, eerie ruin. David exhaled, the prismatic sword fading from his grasp. "It's over, Serena," he said, voice trembling. "Let it go before you destroy yourself." She glared, hatred burning behind tears. "You don't understand. I did this because I was tired of being powerless." Her confession hung in the air. She'd yearned for absolute control, but that longing had devoured her. Behind them, Gideon approached solemnly, swirling tattoos glimmering faintly. "This ends now." He placed a hand on Serena's shoulder, muttering an incantation gleaned from Bart's advanced texts. Slowly, the arcane coating etched on her skin dimmed, unraveling under Gideon's mastery. She slumped forward, unconscious. An electric hush fell over the group. Lily clung to David's side, chest heaving from the adrenaline. Emery, Sasha, and Milo exchanged relieved glances. They had done it. Serena's mania had been halted. In the aftermath, Gideon took custody of Serena's battered copy of J. Bart's notes. Sasha watched with a hint of regret in her eyes, as if she'd recognized how close she, too, had come to letting her ambition consume her. Emery, bruised and weary, placed a hand on David's shoulder. "You okay?" Emery asked quietly. David stared at Serena's unconscious form, then at the night sky. Despite the chaos, he felt a profound sense of clarity. "I think so," he said. "I used to escape into another life because I thought real life had no magic. But tonight, we proved that imagination can enhance reality, not replace it." Emery nodded, a soft smile forming. "Then maybe you've found that balance I've been nagging you about." A short distance away, Sasha scuffed her boot along the ground, looking sheepish. Good teamwork," she managed. "Even if I still plan to beat you in solving the final puzzle next time." David couldn't help but chuckle. "I'm sure you will, Sasha." Milo adjusted his glasses, eyes shining with newfound resolve. "That was incredible. I had no idea we could bring illusions into the real world like that." "That's the danger," Gideon cut in gently. "But it's also the gift, if used responsibly." J. Bart wanted people to discover the magic within themselves. Not to live there forever, but to come back better than before. They stood amidst the twisted wreckage of the old amusement park, the last echoes of illusions fading like dying fireworks. Lily slipped her hand into David's. "So, what next?" He squeezed her hand softly. "I think it's time I focus on my art," he said, a tired grin tugging at his lips. "Really, truly focus. Not just as a hobby. Maybe hold an exhibition, invite you all. I realize now that the true power of imagination isn't something we hoard in our heads, it's something we share to inspire others." Lily's cheeks warmed. "I'd love to see that." Gideon cradled Serena's limp form, ready to escort her somewhere safe to recover. He glanced at David one last time. "You've come a long way, David Rowan." David nodded in gratitude. "I had good teachers," he said, looking at Gideon, Emery, Milo, Sasha, and finally Lily. His heart felt full, buoyed by the knowledge that he'd found something real, something more powerful than illusions, the resolve to embrace life in all its wonder. In the coming days, Serena was handed over to the discreet care of a few other long-time community members who specialized in mental rehabilitation within another life. Sasha, newly humbled, decided to help them secure all existing copies of J. Bart's work so they wouldn't fall into the wrong hands. Emery returned to his calm routines, but with a rejuvenated sense of purpose after witnessing what imagination could truly accomplish. Milo dove into his studies but continued exploring another life under David's more cautious mentorship, determined to harness that power responsibly. As for David, he set up an impromptu art studio in his living room, scouring the city for painting commissions and quietly planning his first real gallery showing. Lily visited often, bringing new cans of spray paint or offering critiques on his swirling dragons and phoenixes. Each day, David felt a deeper connection to the world around him, a connection that no longer felt lacking in magic. One evening, as they strolled back to David's apartment, Lily noticed him gazing at the sky with a whimsical smile. "Daydreaming again?" she teased. He laughed softly. "Always. But now, daydreaming isn't an escape. It's fuel. I see shapes, colors, possibilities in everything. And if the world tries to tell me magic isn't real, I know better." They reached his door, and Lily brushed a light kiss across his cheek. "Glad you're still with us, David Rowan," she whispered, stepping inside. He lingered on the doorstep, thinking of the mental sanctuary in his mind where relics from countless lives remained, safe for the moment from the meddling shadow that had once prowled it. He imagined that shadow self now, no longer cackling. Instead, it watched him with a respectful nod, as if acknowledging a truce. He'd faced the allure of another life and come out stronger, more whole than before. Maybe that was the real treasure, living fully in both imagination and reality without sacrificing either. David closed the door behind him, stepping forward into a future that bridged all worlds. And though new adventures would surely beckon, some more perilous than the last, he knew he would never again question the existence of magic. It was everywhere, in the lines of a painting, the swirl of city lights, the gentle brush of a friend's hand. And, if he ever needed reminding, another life was just a breath away, waiting behind his closed eyelids to show him that even the wildest dreams could give shape to the real world. He smiled. Yes, he thought, magic was very much real, and he was determined to share it with everyone who dared to believe.